we're discussing, what are we doing here? We want to have a look at Asian responses to COVID-19, to not just the outbreak, but also the lockdown and the vaccinations. And especially I was interested where we could find them in very interesting local aspects. I mean, some of these comics you'll see apply everywhere. They are, global. They're not to one particular culture or country, but where we can find little special nuances or aspects of what happened, that I think is extra special. And of course, India is going to be included, but we, as Pinaki said, we're definitely going to start with China and with Wuhan. Specifically Wuhan. These are some people I must thank. Your name is there, Pinaki. But quite a few people have helped me just what's out there that maybe I haven't heard of, because quite a few things, they're not going to be found on Google that easily. You have to kind of dig around, and these are basically the other people at the other crossroads in this huge global highway of information that we have, where we can all share and learn. And by the way, the images from that opening one, I just want to quickly go, maybe I can go back again. Yes, I think it's a lovely image. It's by a Chinese artist, a Wuhan artist called Fire Stealer, who did this whole range of these little vignettes, some of them pretty dark, some of them quite charming. This one, as you can see, you've got someone playing probably the mouth organ, and somebody above going, well, maybe this is getting a little bit late. The music, perhaps, that's what I'm interpreting. And there, just this lovely image of a Chinese motorway with a pig wandering across it, as we know in many parts of the world that is happening. But if we start with this was for most people, this was the first, my gosh, this is because of course around this very time, January 24th, 2020, many of us, if you were into comics, were in Angoulême, and there was this kind of, there was a worry. And in fact, there was a great friend of mine, Wang Ning, who's a publisher agent, was over from China, and we were wishing, I think everything's going to be all right, but we'd only really just heard the beginnings of it. So Angoulême was just before things became really tough, especially, of course, initially in Wuhan. This is too much text, but this is going to be recorded so you can go back to read what's on here. But what's interesting about this is this particular example is pretty early on. February 1st, as you can see, is the date, and when this was originally posted in China. And the artist Tianke, she's is actually pretty critical of what's going on. This is a point where she wanted to comment on the treatment of the whistleblower, Dr. Li Wenliang, who, as you may have heard, was, as she says here, was accused of making false comments. The whole idea that they could somehow suppress this, or this was not, I think we should not reveal the scientific truth. So this is more information you can follow up on. There's a tremendous American publisher called Paradise Systems, who you give full credit to. The link is there for their blogs, and they also publish books, printed books and digital books of Chinese comics in English. So this material is available, which is of course absolutely crucial. I think I'm going to have to probably do this by hand. There we go. Yeah, so I do want to read a few of these if we have any time, because they don't take long.
Can do a bit.
Yeah, I think we should, because that's the experience, isn't it? And I love the comment just in the previous thing that someone was commenting about digital being too quick, and this is the same problem really with this, is you just go, oh, that's nice, it disappears. But if we can just engage, and it's also beautifully designed, this comic, and it's the first one that I'm aware of from Wuhan. So Self-Isolation Mind Theatre by Tianke. It's day 10 of self-isolation. I'm too anxious to contact friends in Wuhan. My friends working in media are wildly busy, but most people are staying at home like me. There are arguments on the internet, but much of it is actually self-explanatory. If you can't get rid of the problem, it's pointless to get rid of the person who alerted you to it. The people of Wuhan are not to blame. Anyone could be in their situation. Citizens have the right to raise questions, even if they might sometimes make mistakes. The government should serve the people. We are citizens, not fans. We don't need to cheer all day. That's just a fact. Like rocks are hard, water is wet, objects fall towards the center of the earth. If you still need this explained to you, someone is ashamed. great. They're just great.
Wonderful.
And especially coming from China, that's actually pretty strong. I mean, obviously it hasn't named names, it hasn't, it's kind of subdued and lets you form your own conclusions, but that was pretty outspoken. And that's very early on. And through February, a few more of these strips, I'll just show you here. I won't maybe have time, but I think they are the writing is really worth reading here. Sometimes clearly here the graphics are simple, even slightly naive almost, but that almost also adds to their kind of sense of urgency and immediacy and their honesty or their authenticity. There's no kind of prettying up these comics. These are direct. So I think these are just some examples of it, but they are very, very atmospheric. And particularly this last one just has a very, very small amount of text. But the main point is that the very last phrase is, may all this pass quickly. And we're still in, of course, in this early stage of the pandemic, or even before it's been declared a pandemic, I think maybe, where there was this idea that it could be contained and it might not be around for too long. And here we are. It's going to come up to 2 years quite soon, and we're still figuring it all out, but it's had an enormous impact, of course, on the whole planet. Interesting from another artist. Again, you can see it's still pretty early, February 16th. By the way, did you like what we're seeing here, Pinaki? What was your response to these?
Wonderful. I mean, this is wonderful. In fact, we discussed. I mean, we don't talk about comics from the epicenter itself.
Yeah.
And if you look at the first one, Tianke, look at the way the circularity of the image. It begins with that. It begins with that beautiful image of the sky and the thing, and the way these things are inverted to create that sense. So you just go on. I mean, I'm just mesmerized as everyone.
Yeah. And the thing is also, of course, the difficulty with showing these comics is that they're, as somebody was saying rightly, they're designed to be whizzed by. And actually, it's kind of strange and rather interesting to see them not moving and not disappearing, because we're in an age where images are so fleeting. And this is one of the strengths of comics, which we've lost, of course, is that comics are there and they're always there, even if they're in print. But digitally, you can go back to them, obviously, but who does that? You're always going on to the next one and the next one. Here we're actually seeing I've had to kind of grab all these screenshots, and it's too much to read, I know, but hopefully, as I said, when you record it, you just pause it and take your time and read these texts, because they're really, again, really atmospheric. This is a clever sci-fi manga kind of storyline where this woman is having to go out to shop for the first time. She's run out of groceries. Yeah, and she's looking at a feeling that she said, it's like I'm the only person left in the world. She's feeling very isolated and doesn't see anybody on the streets. No one answers after ringing, and then she gets messages. She says, I can't help thinking about it looking like, she says, could the posts I'm seeing be written by bots? They send messages, but they don't reply to me. Could it be that I'm the only one left in the world? And then there's a dramatic cut, and a change of format where you have this more kind of manga bleed drawing, and we're seeing it's basically a kind of scientific control where this young man is making sure that each person is still thinking the world's okay, but they're separate. This is a kind of severe lockdown scenario, I suppose. And even the very assistant, this is the genius professor who's devised it all, but even his assistant who helps him also has to be put away, has to go to his world. And at the end, again, they say, see you after the pandemic. So rather like the previous one, may this all pass quickly, see you after the pandemic. There's still this you're left with this, maybe there's a hope that it will not last too long. And that's, of course, clearly what is keeping people going, I think, at that point. Now, wait a minute, let me see if I can make this. So there is the collection, digital and print, of all of these, first wave. There's a link there where you can find out about it. And it's a very rich and interesting document. And I guess the thing to say about all this, of course, is this spread globally so the world could see it. And also it still exists. And also, we have obviously many art forms that are responding to what's going on, the ongoing pandemic. But these are really, to me, I love comics. I love the fact that drawing and writing somehow make you feel more intimately connected to the individual making it. Good. And then this is another interesting one, which you alerted me to, Pinaki, really interesting.
Right.
This is somebody from Wuhan. This is in March, where she was concerned about how her hometown became demonized. My hometown will forever be known for being the place where COVID-19 began. And I drew this comic to shine light on what people don't know: the beautiful culture, the rich history, the strong people, and she doesn't mention, by the way, and the food. Food's very important, of Wuhan. This is what it looked like. And as she says here, Wuhan is something that she grew up with. She lived there, but now it's in everyone's map. I can't go an hour without my hometown being mentioned, and definitely never in night. Don't bring your Wuhan germs near me. Is it true the virus was created by the Chinese to take over the world? We know all those kinds of horrendous fake news were around. What used to be an innocent confusion has been replaced with disgust and pity. And so he wants to basically point out just how big, for a start, how enormous Wuhan is, but you may have known. I mean, it's certainly bigger than London or Tokyo or New York, at 11 million people. And also just some of the beautiful landmarks of the place. She talks about some of the history. She also brings out the beautiful food, and then ends with, I hope this comic gives you a bit more appreciation of my hometown beyond the blur of the headlines. I'm proud of my people and city for staying strong and positive through all this. No, we are rooting for you, the Wuhan I Know by Laura Gao. So I think that's a lovely example again of using the digital form, a platform, to really address a lot of negative sentiment around. So coming to India, I mean, there are lots more. I'm sure there's a lot more from China, but I think we need to see what India how India was responding quite quickly as well. This is, of course, is the superhero point of view, and this is a form that's obvious when you have a villain, as it were, a supervillain, as in COVID, a monstrous opponent then come and save you. Well, this didn't quite work with 9/11, of course, as you may know, when Superman wasn't around to stop the plane. And I don't know how much people still have faith in this kind of fantasy anymore. Because we know we haven't got superheroes, and although they're all over our movies at the moment and our media and TV, the story is still being told, certainly by America anyway. Which is a story I feel that's run out of steam somewhat in the present era, where we realize that we all have to be some kind of team hero of some sort, and work together and make the planet safe again. There's no one going to come and see it for us, probably not even our politicians in some cases. So anyway, this is I just let people see the whole thing. The whole thing's online. Did you read this one, Pinaki? Have you had a look at it?
Yeah. I forwarded. Yeah, I read this. They didn't do that well. Of course, as you all know, Raj Comics is a big franchise. Kind of very
yeah. It is kind of like it is the Indian superhero.
Very popular, but I thought that it's just there. I find mention here and there in academics. I read it, when it came out. I think, but I don't know really whether it really worked that much.
I think
with this virus.
Yeah, maybe at least it got some practical information out to people.
It was much more like as you tell me, it's much more about making people aware. So I think
really we should put I think any form of awareness raising is going to be good, and I think one might argue that Nagaraj perhaps could wear a mask, perhaps he doesn't need to wear one. So that's perhaps a question. But this is for me much more interesting. I got through you, thank you, Pat. I got to meet Agya Mana when I was in home with you, and he's a really super talented artist using the documentary and science, graphic science, in fact, is a whole genre of comics now. And I won't be able to take through everything. I was giving you some screen grabs so you can see what the style is like, what the approach is like. What's interesting here is that he's mixing the current situation, current science, with where the science has come from. I mean, it's to have that deeper understanding that scientists build on their discoveries and their knowledge, and this is of course enormously true now in the rapid development of the vaccinations, which has been one of the extraordinary things that couldn't have happened as quickly before. It's an incremental building of knowledge, and this is fascinating to realize that this way back there were these British and German and other scientists figuring out how do you record and visualize essentially the almost invisible, these vapor trails, the all-important fact aerosols, as we know, are spreading the disease. And beautiful artwork. He's combining almost a kind of classic British Gilray, Rowlandson kind of drawing style in places, with more kind of diagrammatic stuff. And it really brings the history to life and makes you realize how much we owe to all these people that came before and enabled us to be here. What I was interested also to show you, of course, is there are points here, for example, where he does actually incorporate the language, the graphic language of scientific diagrams into the comic, which I thought was nicely done. And clearly, you know, they're not so far away from comics in themselves. Comics are like diagrams.
Paul, one thing, I mean, and I'd be very happy to note that Orgo is actually now working with MIT Lab, which makes us so proud, you know, because Leila Bohiba, the person who actually, the woman scientist who made this idea of aerosol, you know, the way the transmission of aerosol happens, you know, the way it happens, and this very complex idea of fluid dynamics, you know, that's also part of the whole idea of the things transmitting. He has actually done it in, you know, it's such a complex theory. Even if you know one bit of, you know, this fluid dynamic stuff, you get complete, you know, difficult for a common people to understand this stuff. And Orgo is actually trying to, and this from a PhD dropout, remember? He dropped out from a PhD with physics, and he's almost actually taking science to where it belongs, to the people, you know? So, amazing.
No, he was a really inspiring person to me. I thought what he was doing, and great to hear that. Great to hear that. And he's done some other ones you can also read. All these are on drawing history of science. This one's about I'm just need to move my thing down here a bit. Yeah, this is that's the end of that one, isn't it? There, I think. What have we got?
Yeah, that's the last one.
This is the drop one. Yeah, this is the drop.
This one is the MIT thing, you know.
That's the MIT one. That's right. Yeah. That's
and he's actually collaborating it to make it much more bigger. It's bigger thesis now.
Yeah, I think it's very important because I think you know, the diagram is so much also a part of comics. I mean, it's a language we perhaps don't always think of incorporating, but why not use some diagrams when you're doing your comic stories? Right. And this actually is the most comicsy one that he's done, where he's created an imaginary conversation with Charles Rosenberg to take his theories, which relate in fact to the HIV/AIDS epidemic breakout, and applying it to where we are now, and also importantly seeing that these alarming patterns, we know there are patterns going way back to at least a century ago, to the so-called Spanish flu, where things are, you know, we do the same mistakes, we keep wanting normality to come back sooner than it has, and then we get another one coming along, or another setback. So this is much more in the kind of traditional comics form, with maybe a nod to someone like Joe Sacco, I think, in places. But I mean, very, very accessible and also very outspoken. I mean, by the end, is concerned that there will be a downfall of public memory. However much we think we're on top of it, we don't want to keep on having to think about it, and we will. There's something like this will come along again, and we're not necessarily going to be through it all, even if we get past COVID to some new normal. Moving on, also from India, there's Saigo. Is it Saigo or Sago? Maybe
Saigo,
okay, with his brown paper bag. I wasn't aware of this one. This is thanks to you, Pinaki, for seeing this work. I know I know he does many different kinds of stories, but this one particularly was one you picked out, wasn't it? Very, very effective, minimalist one. As we're in this world of the 4-panel comic, or more accurately, probably the 1, 2, 3, 4 vertical scrolling digital comic as well. But this is of course a very big genre now of comics online, and they're efficient. They're like a 4-panel newspaper strip, but made into a block usually, and that works very, very well. You get the joke straight away. And these are, of course, they're even just effective single panel comments from Anushka. Yeah, very nicely done, I thought.
There is a paper, I think, on Anushka's work as well, if I'm not wrong. Yeah.
So that's good to see. And this is something that came through Sharad Sharma. It's from a workshop we did in Assam. This is Priscilla Belong's Tea and Corona, which was built on one of these ideas that tea could actually protect you from, well, it's quite good for you, of course. We British, we love cups of tea as well, but I don't think it's that sure it's going to do much to save you from coronavirus. And so this 4-panel, one of these wonderful workshop projects that Sharad is directing with the World Comics Network. I mean, he's an inspiration, I think, and
very
important. Yeah, and just brilliant at getting people who've never made a comic, but have got something they need to express. 4 panels, that same 4-panel format. I think, and then information comes out that sometimes can really have quite an impact on the local community, and even affect change and improvements for the families and participants. So
he calls it grassroots comics. Grassroots comics.
Fascinating, isn't it? Yeah, yeah, tremendous. Unfortunately, at the end, again, it's the whole fake news thing that she's addressing here.
Right.
Personally, and this is a new project, similarly, I think, based on a workshop. This is what Sharad told me. He says he's been working recently with nomadic.
Just came out.
Rajasthan. Yes. Have you seen this one?
Yeah, I have it. I'll send you one.
Yeah.
Sharad will do, but I will also do one. Yeah.
It looks really, really nicely done. And
brilliantly done. This is one of the best ones. Very visceral, very common, something again, where you take comics to the common people, if you really want to make it very popular.
And often, as you said, this is democratizing, and it's voices that are often silenced. They don't have any other way of getting their points of view and their perspectives out, and raising awareness.
And they're done in vernacular. He doesn't insist on translating it initially. So if it comes out with a book, he insists on translating them. Otherwise, it's directly in vernacular. So it's like a one-to-one dialogue with the artist himself.
Yeah. That's an issue I haven't really perhaps thought about, is with so many languages not just in India, of course, but how these informations have to be I imagine more official ones are being translated in multiple languages to reach as many people as possible. And that is, again, a wonder of the digital age, that we can do that with just a few clicks and to change the texts. And now we're going to come on briefly to South Korea. I'm aware we've got about half an hour, so we're going to be racing through the rest.
No, you can take a bit of time. We have 1 hour.
Yeah, we have time. Do we? We have a bit more time. Yeah, but this is interesting because I haven't touched on these very much, and it is a genre which, of course, I'm rather annoyed about, because we've got a lot of anti-vax people creating all the world. Fortunately, even in Britain, we seem to have relatively fewer than some other countries, and hence a greater uptake of vaccination. But this is
India has done,
and it's going everywhere. And so this is, on the left is an official one saying please vaccinate, and then on the right is an example of anti-vax one from South Korea. The South Korean story, this is a lovely one, which I think what I love about this is that you really don't need to read the text. I mean, I have some languages, but I don't have Korean. But here, I will briefly narrate, but you'll see it straight away. There's an empty playground. There's a mum with two little kids, and they are hooked to their iPhones, as we all are pretty much, or their smartphones. And she's trying to get them to go out and exercise. And I think they're probably going to say something like, "Oh, well, we're exercising our brains," or something like that, probably. Get out of it.
I think that's the comment.
You can make up your own story almost, but the story is so beautiful. And then, at the end here, she tells them off and sends them to bed, and she's really salty. And the husband comes home and says, "What's going on?" Then the next morning, and he's filming them doing disco dancing, probably in the kitchen. As you mean, that became a big thing, is to do family disco. Did you know that? I mean, maybe it's in India as well, but certainly in Britain, anyway, in many places, it seems. Disco dancing in the kitchen became the thing, and putting videos up of this. I think it's wonderful, actually, as I love disco, of course. But so that's an example. And then this is fun too. I haven't found, what's interesting, my correspondent Nako Kim said he didn't find any, I don't think, real examples of where existing franchise characters in Korean webtoons, for example, which are enormous, had incorporated the COVID situation into the storylines. They seem to be doing their own thing in their own story worlds. But there was promotion, and this is one of the big companies, Daum, gave away masks with their characters on, so it's a bit of product placement, and they managed to get the president of South Korea to wear one of the masks. So that's quite cool, I suppose. Now we go to Singapore. Singapore has got the brilliant Sonny Liu.
Yeah. Oh, amazing!
Just one of the world's greatest contemporary cartoonists.
No doubt about it.
Tremendous, and triple Eisner winner. And here he is with work for their health service. And it's got a kind of, it's a little bit, looks, of course, very cute and very childish, really, actually. But that's kind of a way to get people past any barrier of engaging with the story. And then it's actually very informative. And it's written in conjunction with a program leader of infectious diseases, as you can see there. And it is really well informed. And
Paul, one thing I always know with Sunny is that he always, does this research so meticulously. So even in, the new book with censorship, have you censorship that
tremendous.
He has worked so closely with people on ground. Okay. So do you think sometimes it becomes necessary for also the imaginative artists to keep a check on that and maybe work on people, or practical people practically working on ground and doing things? Do you think?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's managed to find that balance, hasn't he?
Right.
Between the two. Yeah. And there's a whole series of these which are all available online. And what I also don't know whether you're aware of, maybe I'm sure you were, but this intrigued me as well. These are single image narratives, which actually to me echo Beatrix Potter.
Yes,
very much, which is of course a British children's book series with cautionary tales about, well, that looks like Peter Rabbit, quite honestly, in the first panel. And they're quite dark. They're not cheery, funny, Disney kind of light things. They're actually quite dark stories, and so it's a totally appropriate style for taking the similar characters. I think there's still the Dr. Duck there, for example, but doing them in a more of a picture story format. But tremendous work, and I mean definitely communicating very well on a more kind of the other format. You're seeing here, of course, is there are different approaches. There's the official ones, there's the scientific ones, then there's the personal ones, and this is Joseph Chiang with a circuit breaker, and these are done in a kind of almost to look as if they're printed in a newspaper. They're very immediate, domestic humor. The toilet rolls, for example, is an obvious.
This is actually a very, very good one. I mean,
they're very nicely composed, and they reached a lot of people, and there was a book collection as well of them. Again, in this mostly 4 or 6 panel, square panel formats, but they work, and I think there's they've definitely.
There's also this archaic quality about it, a bit of an archaic quality to it. Look at the background, the paper.
Yeah, it's meant to look like it definitely wants. It's digital, but it definitely wants to be print, doesn't it? It looks like it's coming out of a newspaper, and it's got that print sort of coloring as well.
Aspirational print kind of thing.
Yes. Well, there is a print edition. There is a book edition.
Yeah, there is a book actually.
Yeah. But that's interesting. I mean, so what we're seeing here already, and as the abstract explained briefly too, is the different facets of it. There's the official stuff, there's the personal stuff, there's the sometimes political and critical stuff that wants to kind of raise sometimes specific local issues. And this is examples of that. That's Singapore. Now we go to Taiwan. These are single page comics that were sent to me by Li Qinlin, by Ye Han. And the storyline is straightforward enough. Basically, it's to do with lockdown. It's too hot to do exercises at home because Taiwan is a subtropical country. And these are obviously very, very loosely drawn. I particularly like the way that she's incorporated the Matisse painting.
Matisse painting, right.
To create this kind of, the way we feel we're all this kind of cycle of every day seems the same and we're going through the same motions. I can do what I need to do when I get up in the morning without really opening my eyes, because I've done it so many times. All the different sequences of opening the windows, making the tea. It's the whole ritualization of our lives that this reflects very well. And charmingly, if slightly naively drawn, but I mean that doesn't matter because the stuff is absolutely personal and works very well. And then she and her husband get very alarmed by the being amongst lots of people, which is another thing, a recurring occurrence we have, is that, are you feeling comfortable in this situation? Is it safe? That's an issue obviously for us all. Also from Taiwan, this is a very sad story. This is an artist who was studying actually in Cambridge, and her pen name is Grizzly Monster. As you can see briefly there, I'm afraid her mother committed suicide during the outbreak of the coronavirus, and this clearly has had a very, very devastating effect on her. And she's made this beautiful, empty, grieving memorial, almost, I suppose, to memories of her family, of her mother's, of her home, time, missing her mother, and it's a very beautiful, beautiful piece. This is from this comic. So I'm sorry, this is slightly somber, but the fact is that this is somebody reflecting on the loss of her mother in very tragic circumstances. I thought it was really, really beautifully done. Also, very beautifully done. Li Chinlin has done this new graphic novel in French. She's interesting because she's Taiwanese, but has spent so much of her life in France, built a very successful career, in fact, in France. This is the sequence this is the epilogue, in fact, of this book. Brief bit of context, it's called Chez Moi, as in Guan Tao is Taiwanese for to be at home, and be comfortable. I know where I belong, kind of thing. She's not very sure where she does belong, whether it's Taiwan or France or both. And during the course of that story, she's had a terrible time with her landlord, who you can see in the second panel there, who's running a noisy bar, basically, downstairs from where she's renting a place in Paris. And it's just, she's had no peace. She's had to sort of deal with this. And finally, he's going to soundproof the place. And then she thinks it's all over with, and in rolls the COVID pandemic to hit her. And she was telling me that where she's living, there was no supply of masks at this time. So she's getting into bed here. She feels for the first time silence because of lockdown. The bar can't. She's saying, "Good evening, silence. It's been ages since I've been able to savor silent moments like these." And so her bed lifts off, which is a lovely, lovely image of reflecting that. And then in flies a bird. Sorry, the images are rather blurry. With a little package, and it says, "Li Chin, we couldn't send you medical masks from abroad, but so here are some we've sewn ourselves. Take care of yourself, Mum." And then, of course, she realizes and starts to sing, and the bird sings, and they're floating. Just such a lovely, lovely way to end the book. So touching, and of course, absolutely conveys my mum's looking after me all the way from Taiwan. So yeah, tremendous. So Philippines, we're getting around here. I'm afraid we didn't get to Indonesia, by the way. My friend, if he's listening or does listen in the future, Hikmat Darmawan, maybe we can add something to the recording. I don't know.
But you go on adding, because maybe by the end of the year we will have more.
We could do another one, couldn't we? Yes. But This is still to come out. This hasn't been published yet. This is actually work in progress. So it's actually kind of almost an exclusive preview. My friend Randy Valiente is working with a children's book writer, Gerardo Argojo Cruz, on this book, which translates as Paper Planes. As you can see, there's 3 paper planes. And I mean, there's more information here, but essentially it is a official commission. So this is definitely not an artistic sort of free piece of work. It's definitely made for the Department of Social Welfare. So it's government funded, as in Duterte's government. Not going to be critical, and that's a little bit concerning to me. I mean, it's going to be very much painting the right picture and not saying that anything went wrong. 3 boys will write their wishes onto paper darts and throw them, and they're from different situations, but all 3 of them are in very difficult situations. There's an example, of course, of what that's like. And it's going to show how, from different circumstances, they are helped to recover. I think maybe there's another one here. Let me just see. Yes, here we go. Yes. And so, I mean, some of them are actually homeless. One boy is homeless. They are an attempt to try and basically paint that the government did come to your aid. It's very much the idea of the citizens being somewhat helpless and reliant totally on government, and the government wanting to blow its own trumpet, shall we say. So on the other side, and this is too much text, sorry, but this is the review by my colleague, my correspondent, Ike Gonzalez. She wrote about this as one of her best of the year from Philippines last year. This is a comic, 4-panel comic strip. We're back to that 4-panel internet digital smartphone format by this artist Kevin Eric Raimundo, who is very outspoken and is getting a lot of reaction to his work. This is a tremendously strong one. If we're the real heroes, why are you neglecting us? That question was definitely not to the people.
And this has a throwback to Pieta figure. The Pieta.
Right. Exactly, it is. Absolutely, you're right. It's like a Pieta figure, isn't it? I also think it looks like when Thor died and Odin was carrying him, or Batman carrying Robin, Robin died. So there's all these iconic uses of the Pieta. Also, you're right, in comics as well. But it's a very strong image. And so is this 4-panel one? Somebody just reflecting on the fact that more and more it's getting closer. Death is just approaching you, and the way these crosses come up like this is quite sinister. The 4-panel comic is really, a tremendously effective way to get across a simple but profound point here. So thankfully, we have that in the Philippines happening, where there is voices of concern. I mean, I just want to briefly also say that, off topic somewhat, but part of what also he's criticizing in his comics now is Duterte's concerted effort to rewrite Filipino history and to elevate the Marcoses to some kind of as some kind of life-saving, wonderful leaders. Rewrite, which of course history can be written. We have short-term memories, very easily can be wiped out. We can forget what they are. Now we're into Japan, and I'm afraid, of course, Japan's could be enough for another 3 hours, I think, because there's so much going on there. But this is, again, we have the official, we have the personal, but we also have a little bit more interesting ones also, which have taken existing franchises, I mean, a bit like Nagaraj perhaps, but have then taken the storyline a bit further and done some quite inventive things with it. And also we will be looking at, can you be politically outspoken in Japan? Because for all its tremendous enormous manga industry, it doesn't have that much censorship compared to some countries, certainly compared, for example, to Britain or India, maybe. It does have a real concern about creating a fuss. Please don't make a fuss. Don't speak out. Don't upset the status quo or the consensus, and don't criticize. And comics, of course, have to do that if they're going to really engage with what's going on. So this is an example of think of this is going to come out almost anywhere, really. It's the personifying of the virus as a mean little creature. It's perfectly functional. It's perfectly functional and widely read, and it gets the information across. These are the efficient ways of getting the information out in infographics, which we know is another aspect that feeds into these comics. How do you explain the diagram, as we talked about with Argumano's stuff? So these are. So it's a builders' trade union. I mean, this is all kinds of different levels of society responding, and as so often in Japan, because comics is so much a part of everyday communication and information sharing, then this is the format you use. Any reactions you like to make to these, Pinaki? I don't know. I'm talking too much.
No, I think this is so important because in India also sometimes some of the promotional booklets. Yeah. There is this. I think government of India also issued a small kind of very amateurish booklet in Corona, which I actually sent it to you. But I think Japan takes it in a very different level because they are much more, I think, visible in that sense. In India, although you make them, they are not that visible or they are not that popular. So in Japan, it pops up everywhere, in that. But India also has a great culture of this, graffiti. So, one thing I always, I don't have too many pictures, but in Bengal at least, or maybe in Kerala and some places of Maharashtra, we have this idea of graffiti. Now, graffiti is also very big in India. It's getting a bit bigger. And so, to do the graffiti in a kind of a comics format and to, get this awareness up,
This is worth mentioning maybe here. I was wondering whether anyone had done something with the picture scrolls, the
Potachitra, yes. They are. I didn't. I have it, but I couldn't photograph it. It's such
because those would be wonderful to record.
I will actually send it to you because
also, I think that someone should be recording and archiving these.
There is a recording. So it's done by Jadavpur University, as you all know, and they are this again. They are actually against Corona. So they are actually creating art. So they are actually they are songs also. They are performative.
Yeah. Exactly.
So when you have the Potachitras or the scroll, there is also an accompaniment of the songs. So there is this Corona Theke Bachun, that song, which is sung in a very, very interesting, like a broken love affair, and, and it's actually made to sing like that. So, people were living wonderfully well. And until this Rakshasa comes and, it's tried to take the garden away from you. But, we can actually, it's also very motivational in the way they say that we can actually put them together back and, maybe make everything, fine. So I will send you that. I think I should have. Sorry, I just missed that.
That's fine. I'm also thinking whether
I have it with me.
Yeah. The other thing was the Carvad format, which we presented in Mangasia, thanks to your help and other people's help.
So we have the real ones, but we'll have the real ones also, so that you can actually maybe present it somewhere in one of the
because
I'll just keep one for you.
because we, as you mentioned briefly, just mentioned Mangasia. I mean, it has to be, of course, been affected by COVID. I mean, the venues themselves wanted to book it. We have bookings in Thailand and in fact in China, but China went ahead, but without taking the exhibition. But I helped them make their own completely Chinese only version of Mangasia, which of course wasn't called Mangasia. So it actually didn't really work, because the whole point is to open out.
But Thailand would be a good place.
Connection between, yeah, Thailand. We still hope to take it there, and we've got other places we're hoping to tour it. Certainly, North America is booking it up for 2024, and we've got some bookings in some amazing venues, in new venues in Europe that are coming up. One in France, one in the Netherlands. Amazing, that are coming up in the next few years. So now this is a bit of a complicated text, but I think it's really important that we discuss this up front, because I've just got more information and I sent it to you, Pinaki. Maybe you didn't have a chance to.
Yeah, I just.
It looks like a fairly innocent cartoon, but actually, my gosh, I think I must try and get this out to you, because did you know? I didn't know a lot about this, but obviously Abe is well known for his Abenomics, as pushing Japan's economic program. But this is a cartoon by the famous Naoki Urasawa, famous for Monster and 20th Century Boys and so many others, one of the great manga artists, posting it on Twitter back in April of 2020, so pretty early on. And Fumio Obata, who we'll come on to in just a little bit, he sent me the context here. But it's worth mentioning in the first paragraph, I won't read this all out, but in the first paragraph, there were, as it says, there were a series of comments, reactions to this, saying manga artists should not post works that make political points. There is not such a tradition, I don't think, in Japan of having the outspoken press cartooning that we have, certainly in Britain, for example, and many other places, although manga, of course, partly grew out of the importing of those very traditions, particularly from Britain, America, and France in the late 19th century. But the point is, let's just read this out, because your listeners won't read it otherwise, I don't think. When COVID broke out in Japan in March, April last year, Abe ordered a delivery of 2 cloth-based reusable masks for every household in Japan. That cost the taxpayer roughly, 26 billion yen, which is, I worked out, 230 million US dollars in today's rate. And the public were talking about several severe shortages. So Abe came up with this rescue plan out of the blue, but we also pointed out that mask manufacturers would soon catch up with the demand, and that was the case. There was no reason to do it, in other words. But by the early summer, people purchased more advanced, safer facial masks, and no one was really wearing Abe's masks around, including his ministers, except himself. That the mask was uncomfortable, clearly smaller than standard size, and there was a hygiene issue when it was delivered. Some people found stains in the fabric, small dead insects inside, the plastic packaging, and then some of the plastic packaging. It was very much questionable policy, and we rightly argued the money should have been spent more wisely. We called this very first countermeasure by Abe, Abe no Masaku, Master of Abe, because it was phonetically close to Abenomics, the portmanteau of Abe and economics. Anyway, at the end it says here, Abe's premiership was coming to an end. It was clearly a populist move that backfired, and no one around him advised him sensibly. The mask policy, when it was a waste of money, optimized that decline. I've just read 1/3 of Abe masks are unused, stored, not even sent out, and are so far costing us 600 million yen, about $5.3 million, just to keep the stock in good condition so that someone will hopefully buy them one day. My gosh, what a mess. You're not meant to comment about that.
Right.
I mean, blimey. So I just thought, good to know the background there. It's not just a kind of funny drawing of a politician with a mask on. It's that's the background to the story. So the more official kind of stuff that was being done, there was a big competition organized by, I think Kovnavi is actually, was organizing it to promote COVID awareness and the vaccines. That's the important thing here with this particular competition. They got tons of entries from aspiring manga artists. This is an example of a mainstream series running in Big Comic, one of the giant adult comic magazines, bi-weekly magazines, where there was a focus on COVID. He's a general practitioner, not a specialist surgeon or doctor, but he here in these manga stories, he's able to show how he's treating people who are not going into hospital, don't have to be hospitalized, but have still got problems with COVID. And in this case, also there's a sequence here where he's having to deal with somebody in a hospital. So that's an example, essentially, of a mainstream series with, of course, a medical background being used for the subject. This is interesting. This is actually from before COVID, but anticipating COVID. It was called Waiting for Liu, set in a fictitious city. Female doctor and a plague or epidemic researcher struggle to stop the spread of an infection. And this has kind of became more relevant, of course, and has found a new audience again. But this shows that people were already anticipating what could happen, and what, of course, has happened, in fact. This is an example, this is mainly a comment on just the problems of doing comedy comics if you can't see people. You know, I was doing this and you wouldn't know what I was. So this is an interesting, just a comment on how do you make funny comics with people wearing masks, essentially. Yeah. And this one is the crazy, wonderful artist Shirigari personifying and slightly cutifying the COVID germ in a series called New Normal Days. I don't know too more about that, but that's his new project. This is a well-known, popular current series, Cells at Work. I'm sure other people have done it, but it takes the Japanese to personify red and white blood cells into cute characters and then have them fighting each other. I think it's one of the wonderful things they do. In this case, it's a motion manga, so it's been animated, but it still is based on a print manga that's in the book. This is the personification of the COVID germ, and then we have the arrival of soap to wash them away. And, I have a slight concern about how the COVID germs are portrayed, because they used to have a tint to their skin color. Or is that just me? But it just struck me that that's a little bit strange. What it represents, I don't quite know. Right, and then this is a particularly unusual one I came across, which is taking La Peste, Camus' La Peste, of course, about the plague, and applying it to the present day. And a girl is transported to the time and place of the original plague. And there's a particularly striking image, a double-page spread of this of the plague creature, the plague symbol from Camus. And this is, again, shows you the status of manga, of comic artists in Japan. This is actually a book with 7 of the big names of contemporary Japanese comics being interviewed about how is COVID affecting you, also affecting what they're producing, their manga stories. So that's quite interesting, even that exists. And then I think as we wrap up, there's some time for some Q&A. This is from our friend, Pinaki. Wonderful work. This is interesting because Fumio is very keen on doing graphic reportage, in many ways in the tradition of Joe Sacco. And his intention had been, in fact, he's been doing a big project on the Fukushima nuclear build the after effects and trying to document this.
Amazing work in progress.
It's going to be good. It's going to be a masterpiece when it comes out. Here, he was, I think, possibly on assignment, certainly on a self-assignment. He managed to get a deal to go to the Olympics. But to go there, he goes through obviously a lot of rigmarole of lockdown and testing, etc. So he recorded that experience. I don't know if he's done very much of the actual recording of the Olympics, though. Did he?
No, he doesn't. He didn't. In fact, he actually used to bring this every day. So he's my Instagram feed. So every day there would be this comic, and almost you document that day, with that comic. But when the Olympics came, he went silent.
Yeah, I don't.
So what he was doing then, I don't know.
No, I'm not sure about that. But it does give you it certainly underlines the extraordinary thoroughness. And, he's getting constantly rung up to check, are you still, isolating? And there's no question of just leaving somebody. Frankly, in Britain, it's extremely lax. There's not really very many, I think they say 1 in 4.
India is laxer.
Yeah, 1 in 4 people in Britain that are meant to self-isolate don't. They don't actually go through with it. So it doesn't really help things, does it? But there's this is from his quarantine work. And yeah, I mean, it's further experiences which we're all having find their way into graphic and comics form. And this is just one sampling of how rich this field is right now, and how it's addressing and it's really, I think it's enabling many people to cope. I think it must be a way to feel that someone else is going through what you're going through, or you're learning how to cope with it. So I think it's an important step that we're seeing here. Comics are coming to help us, and cartoonists, of course, making them.
Thank you.